I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, as the scent of her perfume clung to the air. My wife had just walked past me, holding her phone a little too tightly, her face lit up with a smile I hadn't seen in months. Not directed at me anyway. It was a smile reserved for someone else. For weeks, I had been sensing something was off. Our conversations had grown shallow, dinners were quiet, and she guarded her phone like it held the keys to her soul. And maybe it did. I didn't want to believe it at first. I thought maybe it was stress, maybe I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew. You always know when someone stops choosing you. I finally confronted her one evening, after she came home late again. Her excuses were shaky, her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and her hug felt like a formality. "Are you seeing someone else?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause, a long, cruel pause that told me everything before her lips did. "Yes," she said, just like that. No emotion, no regret, just the brutal honesty of someone who had already left you. In her heart, I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen in disbelief, as my world cracked around me. She packed a few things and left that night. Said she needed time to think. I didn't stop her. I couldn't. I watched her walk out the door, and with her, she took 10 years of love, memories and dreams we had built together. The days that followed were a blur. I stopped eating. I barely slept. Every corner of the house whispered her name. Her laughter echoed in the walls, and the silence she left behind was deafening. But then something inside me shifted. I realized I had been surviving, not living. I had given so much of myself that I didn't recognize who I was anymore. And that hurt more than the betrayal. So, I made a choice. Not to get revenge, not to win her back, but to rebuild myself, piece by piece. I started small. I cleaned the house, not because I had to, but because I needed to reclaim it, make it mine again. I got rid of the things that reminded me of her, the coffee mugs we bought on our honeymoon, the photos that used to make me smile, her favorite blanket that still smelled like her shampoo. I boxed it all up, not out of bitterness, but because healing required space. Then I started going for walks, just around the block at first. The cold air helped clear my mind. I'd pass couples holding hands and feel a stab in my chest, but I kept walking.
I needed to move forward even if it hurt. One day there's a girl, she's staring at the empty seat beside me. That was when it hit me, the violin wasn't just...
I had become so wrapped up in keeping our relationship alive that I had forgotten who I was without it. So, I started writing again. Just scribbles in a notebook at first. Thoughts, feelings, memories, things I had never said out loud. It became my therapy. Every page felt like a release. Weeks turned into months. The pain didn't vanish, but it dulled. I started seeing glimpses of someone I had lost. Me. One evening, I bumped into an old friend from college at a bookstore. We got coffee, talked for hours. It wasn't romantic, but it reminded me that there was life outside of heartbreak. That connection didn't have to come with betrayal. I wasn't ready to date, not yet, but I was starting to feel like myself again. And then one afternoon, as I was tidying up the living room, I found a letter, tucked behind a stack of old books. It was in her handwriting. I hesitated before opening it, my hands trembling. It wasn't dated, but the ink looked fresh. My heart raced as I unfolded the paper. And so we started the wait. The next few weeks crawled by like a nightmare stuck on repeat. I kept looking over my shoulder, wondering if she'd show up again, at work, at home, at the kids' school. My heart lived in my throat every time the doorbell rang or my phone buzzed with an unknown number. And just when I thought things might settle, she made her next move. She showed up at our kids' school. I was called in immediately by the principal. Apparently, Kayla had come to pick up her stepkids. And when the school rightly denied her, she caused a scene so loud and disruptive they had to escort her off the premises. That was the final straw. I filed for a restraining order the same day. My lawyer helped me fast-track it, especially with the evidence we'd collected. Her texts, the photos, the voice messages. It painted a clear picture of a woman unhinged. But you'd think that would stop her, right? It didn't. 2 days later, I came out to my car after grocery shopping and found the windshield shattered, glass everywhere, and on the driver's seat, a note written in lipstick. "You took everything from me. I'll take it back." I remember standing there, hands trembling, the wind slicing through my jacket like ice. The world spun. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. My children were being dragged into this madness. That night, I had to sit them down and explain everything. Not just the divorce, but the woman who had tried to rip our family apart from the shadows. My daughter cried. My son, usually so energetic, just went quiet. I felt like I'd failed them. But Claire, God, Claire held my hand through every bit of it. She never wavered. She reassured the kids. She stood strong, even when I felt like falling apart. "Let's take back our peace," she whispered to me that night. And so we did. We installed cameras around the house, got the restraining order enforced by local police, and filed a criminal complaint for the vandalism. I changed my phone number. I even got a lawyer to send a cease and desist letter to Kayla's workplace, informing them of her actions. Bit by bit, the noise started to fade. And then, silence. No more texts. No more chaos. Just peace. Months passed. We began healing. Claire and I decided to take the kids on a weekend trip to the coast. Just us, the ocean breeze, and the kind of laughter that feels like medicine. We roasted marshmallows, played beach volleyball, and built sandcastles under the sunset. For the first time in what felt like years, I saw my children smile without shadows in their eyes. It was during one of those quiet moments, sitting with Claire under a blanket while the waves whispered, that I knew. I turned to her, heart full, eyes soft. "Marry me," I whispered. Her eyes widened, her smile blooming like dawn. "Are you serious?" she breathed. "I've never been more sure of anything." And just like that, the chapter that had started in heartbreak began to write itself in hope. But life isn't a fairy tale. Even as we planned our future, a dark cloud loomed just beyond the horizon. Kayla wasn't done. I should have seen the signs, the subtle unease, the way Claire's car tires mysteriously deflated one morning, the anonymous reports to CPS claiming our kids were in danger. Each time, nothing came of it, but the message was clear. She was still watching, still obsessed. Then came the twist that shattered everything again. I got a call from a detective. They found something, buried in Kayla's backyard, a hidden box filled with photos of us, me, Claire, my kids, zoomed in through windows, taken from bushes, a complete disturbing shrine. Some were taken at the beach trip we thought was just ours. She had followed us, watched us, documented everything. That call changed everything. We went into full protection mode. Police were involved. A full investigation was launched. And finally, she was arrested. Stalking, harassment, destruction of property, violating a restraining order. The works. I sat in that courtroom weeks later, holding Claire's hand as Kayla was sentenced. She didn't look at me, not once, just stared ahead, expression blank. Maybe she'd finally realized that obsession wasn't love, it was sickness. Or maybe she was already plotting her next move. Either way, she was gone, and this time it felt real. We moved a few months later. New house, new city, new start. The kids adjusted faster than I expected. They made friends. They smiled again. Claire and I, we got married under a canopy of stars in our backyard, with fairy lights, laughter, and people who loved us. It was simple, honest, ours. And as I looked into her eyes that night, I knew we survived hell, but we built our heaven. You might think the story ends there, happily ever after, justice served, a family restored, a love rekindled. But healing, real healing, is never a straight line. Even after moving, even after the wedding, even after the court dates, there were days I'd still wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, certain I'd heard someone outside the window. My mind, conditioned by months of chaos, refused to let its guard down. Claire would hold me, whisper soothing words, and remind me, we're safe now. The kids, they asked about her sometimes, mostly in passing. Do you think she's still mad at us? My son once asked. I crouched beside him, met his eyes and said, she's not part of our lives anymore. You're safe. We're safe. Always. And I meant it, because I'd built walls now, not just physical, but emotional. I learned to set boundaries. I learned to say no. I learned to protect the people I loved, even when it meant confronting the darkest parts of my past. And the biggest lesson, love doesn't grow in chaos. It grows in the quiet, in the patience, in the daily choosing of one another, over and over again. Claire and I started couples therapy. Not because we were struggling, but because we wanted to grow, to keep communication open, to never let another shadow creep in without both of us knowing. We turned our pain into purpose. Claire even began volunteering at a local shelter for women recovering from toxic relationships. I started writing, not for anyone else, just for myself, putting the trauma onto paper, letting it out instead of locking it inside. And you know what? I think Kayla will always be a ghost on the edge of memory, but she no longer controls the narrative. We do. This is our story now, a story of redemption, of survival, of a second chance earned, not given, because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't the ones that start with perfection, but the ones that weather the storm and still choose each other on the other side. So if you're listening to this, and you've been through something similar, know this: you are not broken, you are not to blame, and you can rebuild. One day, one boundary, one brave choice at a time. Sometimes the people we expect to be there for us choose someone else. And that hurts, but it also sets us free. Have you ever had to walk alone when someone who should have shown up didn't? Share your story in the comments. And if this one hit home, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more stories just like this. You're not alone in feeling alone.